give our speaker today, Mr. Tom Warner, a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay.
You're on.
Very good. Yes. I was here a couple of years ago, and at that time, I was passing along information that I had gained so far from this being by the name of Antura. And little did I know that I was going to be doing a book on it, and quite so fast. It seemed that the catalyst for this was a gentleman in Florida, and he reads my newsletters all the time. And one day he sent me all the compilations of all the newsletters. There we go. All the compilations of all the parts of the newsletters where I had received messages from this being. And when I saw it all together, I said, that looks kind of interesting. And I thought, gosh, this would be an easy book probably to do if I could just arrange it by subject matter, because, you know, I'd ask a question like about a mothership, let's just say in 2009, and then another question in 2010, and another question in 2011 or something. And so all of that had to be compiled. And I had a lot of help from people that read my newsletter. That I had about 6 or 7 people that volunteered to edit it and help me compile this. And I asked my guardian angel Theo in one of my what I call active meditations. I said, should I be doing this book? Because I thought I should be doing my next book about him. And he said, Tom, he said on timelines number 7 and 8, and I'll get into timelines in a minute, they're already a little ahead of you. So with that, I knew I was supposed to do the book. And after that, suddenly I started getting all these questions in, you know, just kind of flooding in. It was like it was the right timing, and everybody suddenly were getting downloads to say, hey, I've got to send in a question to Tom. And so that again helped boost the book. It came out, the book is 75,000 words. And I'm already working, I've been told I'm supposed to do a follow-up book, and so today I'll even give you some information that's not in this book that I've asked and will be in the next book. So with that, I'm going to kind of explain a little bit how this process goes on. And there is a scientific principle to this. Perhaps you've heard of the Duke University Rhine tests. They had a sender and a receiver set up, and they were supposed to try and send these images of either squares or circles or stars or whatever to the other person. And this went on probably for 20 or 25 years. And it was okay, you know, it was somewhat successful, but never quite got there. It's my contention, had both the sender and the receiver had gone into a light meditative, not trance, but light meditative state, the alpha state, their results would have gone up to the top of the chart. Okay? And they wouldn't have to be across from each other. They could be across campus, they could be halfway around the world, or as I found out, halfway across the universe. Because this telepathic communication is something that goes through an energy that I've been told by Antura, this being that I talked to. It goes through an energy, and he says, I'm not going to tell you what it is. He said, you're going to have to learn to discover it. Your scientists will discover it one day, but he says it's going to be pretty far in your future. So we won't see it, but there is a scientific basis for telepathic communication, and it can be done. If they were to start these experiments again and use altered states and put people in different cities or whatever, with a little bit of practice, they would graduate beyond the squares and circles and everything to full sentences. And it just is something that practice makes perfect, or at least more perfect. It's practice, 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 and that's what I've been told from the start. So that's where I believe the scientific principle is, and I really truly believe that far in the future, we will not go to the stars, I've been told, until 3150. It's not going to be 2200 or 2400 like the sci-fi movies. It's going to be 3150 is when we're first going to start going to the stars. There will actually be one ship that will not use what's called a portal, and will go in the long way, and they'll actually be picked up because in the years they'll gone, people will have figured out how to do portal hops, and they will be found. So that's going to be something. And then by 3400, there are going to be 17 Earth starships that are be going all over the universe doing investigations. So pretty far in our future, but there are things that we can work on, as you'll discover, because I guarantee if you read this book, there are many, many details in it that you have never read before, you've never heard before. It's as one of the people that gave me a review on Amazon.com said that this book should be made in a movie. I personally don't think so. Being in the international film distribution business, I do think ideas from this book will be used by science fiction writers in the near future. So we'll see. But you'll see when you read the book. Okay, Antura. One day I was talking to my own guardian angel Theo, and we started talking about some ancient ruins in Europe, and they were supposed to be Syrian ruins. And he said, "Oh, Tom, someday you're going to get to see those." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean? Me personally, or you humans?" And he said, "No, you personally. You're going to get to meet a Syrian." And he said, actually, he's tuning in right now. He said, "Well, what would you like to talk to him?" And after I got over the shock that this was not a private conversation between me and my guardian angel, this was a party line. I said, "No, let me come up with some questions, and then I'll start asking questions." Now, when I started communicating with Antura, I was to find out that he's a member of what has been told to me is called my soul cluster, my soul group. Now, these are fragments of my soul, and there are typically 6 to 12 on average fragments in a soul cluster, all having lives on earth, hundreds of lives. And this is for our soul's learning and benefit. Okay, so it turns out that Antura is a member of my soul cluster. So it's like, we're really good buddies. It's like, the communication is even easier because it's almost like twins on steroids, I've called it. Because it's just an easier communication. And I asked him, "Well, when was the last life that you had on earth with me?" And he said, "Oh, it was back in Atlantis, where I was one of your tour guides, because 200 years before Atlantis sank into the ocean, I had about 1 million people requesting benevolent outcomes, which is what the Gentle Way books are about. And so earthquakes are getting worse and worse. There was a war between the sons of Belial and the Law of Warren. I'm sure lots of you have read about that in the Edgar Cayce books and all. And so I migrated with several thousand of my followers through Portugal and what's now Spain onto Egypt. And supposedly I became the first priest there because I smuggled out these healing instruments from Atlantis, and I was healing people in Egypt. So he was one of my tour guides, as he called it, to help people get to the promised land or whatever. So when I started talking to him, he said, "Tom," he said, the rules that we're going to be under are going to be the same as with your own guardian angel, okay? And it's going to be that I'm that you can ask questions to me. You can't ask general questions. You can't say, well, what do you look like? And I give you my whole description. You've got to ask question by question by question. So I found out that he's amphibian. He has 4 fingers and toes, and they're webbed naturally. His skin color is a blue, and it's more of a blue towards a dolphin as compared to a bright blue, from what I understand. He says it's beautiful, okay? And he has no hair. He has only 1 gill behind one of his ears, okay? He says pretty unnoticeable to most people. And their bodies are more like fish because he comes from a water planet that's the 3rd planet from the Sirius B sun, and all but 10% of the planet is water. And so his soul, all the souls that settled that world, settled it 18 million years ago. And they were the new kids on the block because there are actually societies in the Sirius B star system that are well over 1 billion years old. Okay? And so they were the new kids on the block, but they could see that they were going to be catalysts themselves. And so they would have these cities that were down a mile deep in the ocean. And this image right here, this is the Abe Sapien character in the Hellboy movies. That's as close as I could find to something that looked a little similar to Antura. So you can actually go and Google Abe Sapien images, and you'll find that there are a number of different kinds of views of this, but that's as close. And Antura says that this was actually sort of downloaded into the writer's imagination, if you will, when he was writing the screenplay or the books for Hellboy, these images. So, and there are actually, if you've ever seen the Hellboy movies, there are actually humanoids in the universe with horns. It's kind of a side thing. So he telepathically communicates with me. And as I mentioned, you have to understand, this is my first time I'm using the PowerPoint presentation. So I may get a little ahead of myself and back up. But so you guys get the first one. And the cities are 1 mile deep. And they started building, they lived in caverns for protection, and then they started building on top of the caverns. So now they have these big bubble cities that are like 1 million people or whatever. So now we get to the next thing. He started giving me a timeline of things that are going to be happening. The first thing he told me was that, if you remember, a few months ago, there was this Russian premier by the name of Medvedev, if I'm pronouncing his name close to correct. And at the end of some conference with all these news people around him, he supposedly didn't know that a microphone was still on, and happened to say, oh yeah, we have lots of files on ETs. And Antura told me it was like a trial balloon that they were putting up to see if the Russian people would be scared to death or what. And they found, oh, that's interesting, tell us more, kind of deal. So supposedly, somewhere around November of this year or so, the Russians are supposed to release their secret files on all their ET communications. Okay, now that's what's supposed to happen. Now keep in mind, I have found on probabilities, when you start dealing with humans, you know, things can move back and forth. Why that? You know, because we're human and we're writing the future as we go. But that's going to be the first thing. In 2015, the Pleiadians are going to arrive. Okay, and where are they going to land? They're going to land in Russia. So he who is the first one to start you know, publicizing what things are really about. There's going to be a contingent of players